I continue my series on the 36 decans of the Zodiac today with Virgo 3, the last 10 degrees of the sign. It's a complex place in the Zodiac because we have Mercury ruling this decan, and it's really strong here. It's exalted in Virgo, it's in its own sign. So that capacity to analyze and think is really strong. But then it's combined with Venus, the goddess of love and beauty and harmony and justice. And she's in her fall, meaning she does not do well in this particular decan. And we'll talk about those ideas of exaltation and fall in the video, as well as talk about the nature of this part of the zodiac having something to do with the idea of individuation, this coin termed by Carl Jung for the way in which human beings, there's this very natural process that can unfold where we seek for wholeness on the material plane, to become more of who we are, to manifest all of the different aspects of who we are, and that can often involve a journey out into the world, into the chaos, into different experiences that show us who we are. So I'll explain all of that. The Ten of Pentacles card is the tarot card associated with this decan. It contains some of those images of individuation, and we'll also talk about ancient esoteric texts that talk about or show the ways in which, as we go through this process, there's certain amount of having to let go of who we thought we were. And then we'll also talk about the numerology and the Hermetic Kabbalah Malkuth, number 10, the very last of the Sephirah, and how that is also associated with these ideas of what we have to let go of as we try to manifest what is possible in the material world. And then lastly, I'll talk about the chart of Stephen Jobs, who had his rising degree in this part of the zodiac, and some of his last conversations involve that idea of death and letting go. So there's a lot to talk about. I hope you enjoy the video. If you do like and subscribe. It helps people find my content, and I'm trying to grow my channel, so I'd really appreciate it. So let's go to the whiteboard associated with this part, or with this talk. And as usual, I'll just talk you through first, what is Virgo? What's the sign of Virgo? Well, it's an earth sign. All earth signs are pragmatic. They have to do with what we can create in this world, the mundane world, the physical world. And Virgo is mutable, so it's got a certain quality of flexibility. All mutable signs happen at the equinoxes when the seasons are shifting and changing. Here we have the season going in the northern hemisphere from light to dark. So there's a shifting quality to this time of the year. And then Virgo is ruled by Mercury, Hermes in the Greek pantheon. There's mythology around Mercury showing the trickster nature of that energy. People with Mercury strong in their chart have this intelligence that is, let's say, has this capacity to play tricks or to play with ideas in a way that is surprising to other people. We can look at the myth of young baby Hermes stealing his older brother Apollo's cattle. Apollo was the sun god. And that gives you a sense of some of that trickster quality. I talked about that in the last couple of videos. You can check those out. I'll drop a link below if you want to know more. Yeah, so Mercury has this quick, flexible mind. It's fast and speedy. I guess that's contained in the idea of quick. And it can be about communication because Hermes was the messenger to the gods as well. So hold all that, and then we'll add in the idea of this particular 10 degrees of the zodiac, Virgo 3. We talk about the planetary rulers. I mentioned them briefly in the introduction. And under the triplicity system, it's Venus, the goddess of love, relationship, harmony, beauty, art, but also justice. She was the goddess of war when she was Morning Star. A lot of folks don't think about that part of the Venusian quality. And she's in her fall in this sign. I'm about to do a video. I'm doing a series of videos on planetary dignity. I've already done one on when planets are in their own sign. That's called domicile. When they're exalted, that's called exaltation. I'm about to do one on fall. I'll drop all of those as well. If you're following the series, in a month or so, the one on fall will be there. So what happens when a planet is in its fall? Well, it doesn't have the respect of others. It can feel like an outsider. It doesn't have the quality. People aren't admiring it in the same way. And so it can feel like sometimes a little bit of a renegade in that sign. The Venusian energy, as you can imagine, as we're entering the season in the Northern Hemisphere where death is happening, leaves are falling from the tree, that as we age, Venus loses her power to, impress other people. So this is some of the feeling of Venus in her fall in this particular uh, sign of Virgo. But she has special power in this 10 degrees. And so you could think of that special power as perhaps the capacity to appreciate the beauty that is within the moment of death. And we're going to see that with Steve Jobs as he talks toward the end of his life about what the potential is for death. We can also see that when you think about the way the leaves fall from the trees, oftentimes they're quite beautiful at that moment of death. We see a vibrancy, and so appreciation for that loss, that moment of loss. And then, of course, we have Mercury as the other ruler by the Chaldean order. I already talked about the idea of Mercury. When we combine these two energies, it creates a really poignant possibility for folks who have planets or points in this part of the zodiac. Part of what they may pay attention to is that bittersweet notion of confronting the reality of loss and limitation about what's possible to create in this material world, being willing to step into those limitations and find out who they are through going ahead and taking risks about not being able to create as much as they may want to. And that's what happens when you confront yourself, when you step into life and take risks, you come to know you're not all that. And you also get to come to know what you are and what you do contain. So, as you manifest. And that's really the idea of the Hermetic Kabbalah that we're going to talk about in a minute, is how spirit manifests in the world. But first, let's talk about the ancient texts that are associated with this deck. And we're going to see that notion of death and decay throughout. They all suggest that combination of exalted mind, Mercury grappling with the limitations of the material world, the inevitability that some part of the vision and creation is lost, that idea of decay, Venus in her fall. So first we have Ibn Ezra, who describes this decan as a white woman who is self-laudatory. She is wearing a dyed mantle. Her hands are leprous, and she is praying to God. We see that combination of sort of beauty. She's wearing a beautiful object, but her hands are leprous. So the decay of the body is contained within this description. And also the melancholy and the fear that can come up as well. She's in a moment of prayer, understanding, you could say, or reaching out to something larger. And then we have the Picatrix, a pale man of large body wrapped in a white linen cloth, and with him a woman holding in her hand black olive oil. So we see white and black, light and dark combined in this. And this is a face of weakness, old age, illness, sloth, the injury of limbs, and the destruction of people. Again, we just see these notions of death and decay and loss, right, of the physical body. preparing to let go. And then we have Agrippa, a white woman and deaf, or an old man leaning on a staff. The signification of this is to show weakness, infirmity, loss of members, destruction of trees, and depopulation of lands. So, you just get the vibe of the inevitability of loss in the material world is really being the energy of this decan. But at the same time, what does that allow us to do as human beings? Um, so this is the tarot card associated with this deck in the Ten of Pentacles. And we can see this is the image of, I'll see if I can draw here. Give me 1 second. So we see here, oh, that color is not showing up. Let's see if I can make it a little brighter for y'all. Um, Here we go. And a little thicker. I am learning, which is part of the Virgo vibe. Okay, so here we go. You see here in the image, um, that's Odysseus from the Odyssey. And the Odyssey is a story of individuation. The figure Odysseus goes off on all these different adventures. He leaves his home and family. He confronts the Cyclops and the story of where he's attempting to fight the Cyclops and he uses his wit and intelligence to prevail. So that kind of shows the mercurial, right? Look how great I am. But at the same time, he turns around and I think he taunts the Cyclops, and that leads to further problems. So the hubris that can be involved with that exalted Mercury in Virgo. And so there's something about each of the adventures he has where he has to go through and confront the shadow side of who he is, the fact that he is not all that, and how he matures and expands in his capacity as he has these adventures in life. And that's the whole tale of individuation that, as I said, Carl Jung coined that term, the idea of the conscious part of who we are knows or thinks certain things, but there's always parts of ourselves that we're unaware of, that shadow. And as we integrate the shadow part of who we are in our life and confront our littleness, the fact that we're not all that, we gain actually our capacity to and our tools to become more of who we are. It's kind of this interesting contradiction as we humble ourselves. That's part of the quality of Virgo, and are honest with ourselves about what we are, the beautiful things we contain, and the ways in which we may not contain things that we like, that shadow stuff. It's interesting with the idea of shadow. I'm going to go off on a little tangent here. What's contained in the shadow isn't necessarily always bad. If we have a low sense of self-esteem, we may discover that we're better than our limited minds think we are. Say we grew up with ideas of not being good or good enough. Our family kind of put that in us. And then one of the things we can have to let go of is that idea that we're not loved or worthy of love. We may come and encounter experiences where we're able to see that idea of ourselves is wrong, and that the whole truth, the truth that's in the shadows, is our lovability as well. So I think that's an important thing to understand about the individuation process. So anyway, we see Odysseus, and again, he's a figure often associated with that idea of individuation in the card. We also see, I'm going to change the color here again, the pentacles. This pentacle down at the bottom, that's the 10th of the 10. We see these pentacles are actually arranged in accordance with the Kabbalah. This is an image of the Kabbalistic tree of life, and the people that created the tarot deck attempted to weave in notions of astrology as well as Kabbalah and other ancient esoteric wisdom in the cards. So that just reinforces some of what we're trying to get at here, what I'm circling around about the idea of this card, that it has to do with manifesting things in the real world and the limitations of that. So now I'm going to move on to that Kabbalah, the tree of life. And whoops, there we go. So here we see that Keter is where spirit enters, and it moves down through the different sephira to manifest into the world. The last one being Malkut here, which is the number 10. And the tree of life is this mystical diagram that represents the descent of divine inspiration into the material world. The lightning flash traces the flow of creative energy from divine source at the top of the physical world to Malkuth at the bottom. And this process illustrates how spiritual concepts take form and manifest in reality. I always like to repeat that because this is something that, as we grapple with notions of what it is to manifest and connect spirit into body and form, the more that we actually grapple with it, or I grapple with it as I do these videos, the deeper it sinks in the reality of what this means on a visceral level, let's say. So then let's go to the next diagram or a slide, and that talks about Yesod and Malkuth. We talked about the number 9 of Pentacles when we talked about Virgo 2. Now we see the movement from that idea that comes to us from the unconscious, that as we manifest it in the world, that Malkuth. So Yesod is the realm of unconscious dreams, intuitions, and emotions. It serves as the foundation that connects these higher spheres to the physical world. And Malkuth is the realm of the physical manifestation, the material world, the tangible. It represents the culmination of all the spiritual energetic processes where the abstract ideas, we get a great idea of what we want to do, become real, and the divine gets grounded into matter. But you know what? There's a certain amount of melancholy that comes with that, because as we actually manifest, it is never going to be what we imagined to begin with. So moving from Yesod to Malkuth involves translating the energies of the subconscious and intuitive realm into the physical actions and manifestations. It's about grounding dreams, emotions, and spiritual insights into the concrete reality of everyday life where they can take shape and be experienced. And lastly, I'm going to share the chart of Steve Jobs. He is, and I just want to stop that pen 1 second, see if I can do this. Oh boy. It does not want to do that for me. Okay, I'm just going to have to let go. My Virgo, it likes a little perfectionism. I do not know why there's this shadow here, but we're going to live with it. Okay. So anyway, Steve Jobs, I'm not sure which it is, had his rising degree here at Virgo 22. Now, in many ways, as much as he was innovative and brought amazing technology into the world through his Apple systems, we can see this reflected by the fact that Jupiter and Uranus are together in Cancer in the 11th house. Jupiter's exalted in Cancer, so does really well there. 11th house can have to do with collective consciousness. It's groups and organizations, but it's also all those big ideas that get manifested into the world. And he basically changed collective consciousness through part of his work, the ways he expanded our ideas about what's possible through technology. And so that was his genius. But I also have to acknowledge he was a bit of an asshole in real life. The way he came down on people in the workplace is pretty well known. And of course, that could be part of his Virgo ascendant as well, because as I said, Virgo has this desire. The shadow side of Virgo is the negative notion of perfectionism, where you attack and say things aren't good enough. The conscious positive side of Virgo is that desire to become a whole, to make things whole in the material world, to want to make or create something that meets up to that imagined idea that you had, right? So, but let's just talk about, because I thought it fit really well, one of the last quotes of his life as he faced a diagnosis of pancreatic cancer. He talked about this idea of death and confronting death, and how it clarifies life in some ways. Even if we think about the beauty of those fall leaves as they burst into color before they die, that could be seen as that Venus in her fall. There can be part of our culture, especially in the United States, is the rejection of having to sit with the reality that we're not that we're all going to die. But when we take that truth in its fullness, it can clarify our life and lead to this beautiful moment of recognition of the beauty and value of the fact that life is also limited, that it must end. And we see this reflected in Steve Jobs' quote: "Remembering that I'll be dead soon is the most important tool I've ever encountered to help me make the big choices in life. Almost everything, all external expectations, all pride, all fear of embarrassment or failure, that's a Virgo thing too. These things just fall away in the face of death, leaving only what's truly important. Remembering that you are going to die is the best way I know to avoid the trap of thinking you have something to lose. You are already naked. There is no reason not to follow your heart. No one wants to die. Even people who want to go to heaven don't want to die to get there. And yet death is a destination we all share. No one has ever escaped it, and that is how it should be, because death is very likely the single best invention of life. It's life's change agent. It clears out the old to make way for the new." So this is a perfect encapsulation of that energy of the last decan of Virgo, the ways in which stepping into life and meeting ego death, which is what happens when we attempt to do something we're afraid of, when we have desire to do it, but we're a little afraid of it, but we step into it and have to accept ourselves that maybe we don't do it in a perfect way, but it's still exciting. The experience of taking a risk and coming to know who we are. There's a certain clarifying, exciting quality to that. And I want to close with one last thing, which I thought it was so fascinating, that the image that came up when I was looking for an image of Steve Jobs has Nemo. It's from the film Finding Nemo. And wow, look at his face of fear in the background, which is kind of interesting. And that film, which was created by Pixar Studios, which Jobs was involved in, is an individuation story, a story about life and death and fear and anxiety about death. And so, and what happens when you actually get out of your little bubble and have to go out into the chaos of the universe and face that you're not in control, you're not in charge. So these are all things that Virgos kind of can sometimes, quake at, because Virgos want to put everything in order and know that everything's organized because it gives them a sense of security. So I know this, I have a lot of planets in Virgo. So I hope you enjoyed that video. I love doing these videos. So I'll see you in a few days where I do Libra 1, which will be really exciting to move on to air. So talk soon.